Are you dreaming about travelling again? I bet you are. So give yourself a break and listen to my brand new travel podcast. It's made for people like you, by people like you. And in these podcasts, there will be interviews with different types of travellers and the strange characters that I've met on the road, with stories and anecdotes from the last 32 years of my continuous backpacking and working around the world. Also, there'll be cynical destination descriptions and the occasional travel tip to smooth your journey. And for all the squeamish listeners out there, I just want to say that no studio was used or abused in the making of these podcasts or any of the recordings. So please check it out, and I hope you like it. Oh, and by the way, my name's Alan. This interview was recorded in a park in central Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, and you can hear the hum of the rush hour traffic and the wind in the trees. I apologise for any noise above and beyond the recording. I hope you still enjoy it. Thank you. This week, my guest is Alex, who apparently I met in 2010 in Malaysia. He's Portuguese, and he's a well-travelled guy. I'll let him introduce himself, and he can tell you his style of travelling, everything about himself.
I've been in 54 countries, and I spent almost 10 years in Asia. Then I came back home. And before that, I went all the way to the 5 continents. My whole life, my whole mindset has been travel, so I don't try to spend any money outside that scope. It's always about travel.
And which of the Asian countries is your favourite?
Well, Taiwan, because I lived there for 5 years and a half for sure. But of course, I have also a very strong connection to China, and I guess that's the reason I went to Taiwan in the first place.
Okay, and it's funny because the last time we met was in Taiwan.
Yeah, I told you to go there. It was a good place.
In Yulin.
Nice yeah, Yulin, yeah, exactly.
Yulin. How did you start travelling as a boy? How did travelling enter your life?
Well, it's kind of funny, actually. When I was 15 was the first time I went camping with my brother without my parents. And, even since I was a child, I've always been a kid from the streets. So I always went everywhere without much constraints except for the money. It was always been the major constraint. But the most funny story is actually, I was about 19 when I had a friend of mine. He told me that Iron Maiden was coming to Algarve.
Iron Maiden?
Yeah. I would like heavy metal in those days. So I want to go to the south and watch the concert with Iron Maiden. But again, I was always strapped for cash. So I thought, man, I cannot do this. And then I figure out, if I do like the 9 train, which is takes hours to get there, it's exhausting, and I just sleep here in a very low conditions, I still can make it. So that's why I figure out, even if you're strapped for cash, even if you don't have much money, you still can do it. And that was the beginning.
Yes.
And then year after year, I started going to the Algarve, which is the south of Portugal, different places. I spent most of the time alone. And then later on in 94, I did my first trip around Europe. It was a camping trip, and it was like a big group of people, and we were just on a bus, and I never saw snow before, and then I was camping on -10
wow.
In Switzerland, in Kandersteg, and then I saw again snow in Austria, and then in Germany, and then in Italy and France, and it was still amazing. It was my first long trip.
Year would that have been?
1984.
1984, so 1980s,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And were there a lot of people doing what you're doing, or did you feel as though you were the first person to...
Yeah, in Portugal, it was very, very uncommon. However, the people were actually on that bus. Most of them were the kids, the children of people that were also travelers. So I was like 20 at that time or something like that. And they were like 15 or 16, and they actually have more traveling experience than I have because they went with their parents. And in my case, I almost never traveled with my parents.
Okay, that's interesting because a lot of young people, there's 2 Dutch guys in the hostel, and I said, how long have you been travelling? And they said, this is our first trip. And up until now, they've travelled with their parents. And now this is their first trip away, and they're acting, they get drunk every night, and they're just up until 5 or 6 in the morning. That's just another way of travelling. That's how you learn, isn't it? Which destination would be your ambition now to go to? What would be the place you'd want to go to now?
Well, fair enough. Well, definitely in Central America. Because again, I've been in 5 continents, and I spent 10 years in Asia. I don't feel the calling of Africa, although I like to go to South Africa. But my biggest passion now is definitely, and it has been for a very long time, Central America. I'm talking about south of Mexico, Costa Rica, Guatemala, all of those, and of course a bit also in South America as well, Peru, Bolivia, and I like to spend a few years in Argentina, and I like to spend a few years traveling there.
Okay, there's a police car cruising around here, and I just wonder if they're going to stop because we're not wearing masks, which I'm going to take out. No, they're going past. What is it about South America that's drawing you in?
Well, I would say two things. First, history. We talk about the Maya civilization. We're talking about all sorts of Asian civilizations, but mostly the jungle. I would say because I spent a lot of time when I was in Asia on the jungles.
Yes.
In Malaysia, in Laos, even Taiwan has a lot of tropical forests. And I'm used to see snakes, and I'm used to see all kinds of things. The fact it's just so green. That's what drives me.
But also it's hot. Incredible. It's hot. It's humid, and it's awesome. It's that. I've always enjoyed that. Yeah,
I'm not much of a cold person. I love the heat, so I'm okay with mosquitoes. I'm okay with very high temperatures, with shorts, and I'm okay with.
Wow. Are you the sort of person that gets bitten by mosquitoes or not?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
But I never put repellent whatsoever, even though sometimes it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
I just take it as it comes.
You're a brave man.
Yeah, I'm from the jungle. So I love it.
Okay. Have you had any bad experiences while you've been traveling?
Yeah, some, of course, nothing terribly serious up to the point I would die. I would say more like in terms of places. Cambodia changed a lot in the recent years, but when I was there 10 years ago... Cambodia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite different those days. Everyone just wants my money, so I didn't like it much. But person-wise, in terms of like a person, not so much, because even if people disappoint me, as long as they don't get my money, it's
that's
still
right.
okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
And I'm still see someone a shoestring. I'm incredibly careful with that, so that's okay.
Right. How many languages do you speak? Because I know you speak at least 2 or 3.
Yeah. Well, before I spoke Portuguese, English, French, and Spanish, and Italian. But I spent so many years trying to learn Chinese that these days just Portuguese, English, and Chinese.
I can tell you, his Chinese is good. He says it's not, but it is. It's good Chinese. Is it the destination or the journey that turns you on?
For me, it's always about walking different places.
Walking?
Yes.
Okay.
I live for walking. It doesn't have to be in that very special place that everyone goes. Actually,
that's right, yeah.
That doesn't really matter much.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that amazing, landscape. I just want to see different places because I have the incredible memory. I still remember places I've been like 30 years ago, like it was today.
Yes.
I don't remember a lot of faces, but I do remember places and travel trips very well, and some of very epic trips, like the one I did around Taiwan for 90 days around by scooter.
Okay.
But I do memorize streets, I do memorize directions, points of reference, like in an incredible way. So I have this need to walk into a place I have never walked before. And it can be a crappy city, a crappy street. It doesn't matter. It has to be something different.
That's right. And it's that beautiful thing of walking into somewhere you've never been before and possibly getting lost, or just walking into the town to see what's there.
Exactly.
Or walking out of a town to see what's outside of town.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be that tourist spot that everyone goes. It's sometimes just, walk on the streets and then... These like hidden gems everywhere, and that's
right.
That's a beautiful thing, right?
Awesome.
And meeting people in places that no one goes, and that's just incredible. For example, I was recently in Croatia, and I traveled for 2 weeks there. I was planning to go to Slovenia, but I couldn't because of the lockdown, and didn't allow me to go there. So I spent 2 weeks in Croatia, and the last day I was just incredibly tired because the previous days has been like non-stop. So on the last day I just stayed in Zagreb. But I don't want to stay in the city. Just no time, no way, a waste of time, right?
Yes.
So I just went to this lake in Zagreb, and I went for a swim there. Okay, and it was beautiful. I just had just a great time, because here no one swims on the city lakes. Everywhere we always go to the ocean,
yes.
where the beach is, right?
Yeah.
But there they just have a lake, and it's crazy. People are just like, rowing there and stuff like that. And I was just like taking a swim, and I had a great time,
And did you talk to many of the locals, or?
I did spoke with some, but mostly on the spots, like on the gas house, but not so many, I would say.
Okay, Sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's easy. It depends where you are.
Yeah, it means if you do like long trips like I did before, I spent like 3.5 years traveling before I started in Taiwan. All my life was pretty much being social. And in those days, if you're not social, it's incredibly tough because you need to know where you should go and you get the tips of the best spots, right? But I was in a really short period of time, so my point here on this trip for Croatia was see as much as possible, right?
Oh, okay.
And actually, although there's this very important place, which is Pelitz Lake, which everyone goes, and I didn't go there. I had far more fun to go to some spots that no one goes.
Yes.
And I just enjoyed so much.
I'm the same with you. And a lot of people say to me, for example, I went to India mainly to go and see the shipyards where they scrap the ships.
Yeah, in the Gujarat.
No, it was in Alan.
Okay.
Alan, which is on the left-hand side in the north. But again, it's one of those places, there's plenty of them. But it was just, for me, that was an incredible highlight of the journey. I didn't go inside the Taj Mahal because Agra is a shithole.
Yeah.
And they were asking $25. And $25 to me is like living for a week. But that's only me. That's me and you, actually, because we don't do all that special stuff.
Yeah, for example, I was 6 months in India. It was the only country I didn't like it. Actually, I hate it. But I have to say it was of a blessing because it was like being in the army in a way that was incredibly tough for me. I was always incredible low budget.
Yes.
I was sleeping in places like $1 and I always went the cheapest trains. So I slept on the floor of bus stations and train stations.
And the place is a shithole.
Yeah, it was really, really horrible. But looking back, I see it was like a blessing because it was one of the most deepest trips of my life. And I did actually went to the Taj at the end of the 6 months.
Okay.
And it was a big deal, compared to the rest of the trip. So the air was so polluted there in Agra.
Yes.
For example, near Agra is this place called Oshas.
Yes.
People just go a few hours, and I stayed like 4 or 5 days, and I absolutely love it. There was almost no tourists, and I always spend my time swimming because actually the river was clean, and I went to see the vultures flying, at 6 a.m. in the morning because I met this Portuguese guy there, and he's a vet, so he knows a lot about animals.
I bet that was interesting.
It was amazing. I never imagined vultures was just such an amazing animal.
No, they are. They're fantastic birds. They clean up all the rubbish and the trash and stuff. They're absolutely awesome birds.
And some places in China, actually, when the person dies, they just chop it to pieces and they give it to the vultures.
Yeah, gruesome. Yeah, that's a gruesome picture. Do you take plenty of photographs when you're traveling or not? It's because some people don't, some people don't.
I take tons. I first year I took about 60,000 photos.
Wow.
I spend every day just walking, looking for photos, opportunities. Sure, I take typical photos, but also I try to take a lot of photos that most people won't take, like daily life stuff. The thing was, when I was a kid and was in elementary school, I was very social in those days.
Antisocial?
Yeah. Pretty social after I was 15, but when I was in Asia, it was incredible. It was for the first time in my life that time was elastic. Because before, everything was about doing as much as possible. But when I was there was do as little as possible, as cheap as possible, okay? And go as far as possible.
And it's cheap. You can eat for $1.
Yeah,
like breakfast and lunch for $1.
I did actually eat for $1 for almost 10 years. Yeah. When I lived in Taiwan, I had to eat for $2. But even on Christmas, I still eat for $2, and also on my birthday as well.
Yeah.
So I was incredibly, on a shoestring in the sense that I was restraining myself all the time, and that was tough.
But do you still travel cheap, or do you tend to spend a bit more money these days as you get older? Because it's sometimes some older people need
I came back now, and to be honest, when I arrived here, I had this plan because I've been on the shoestring for such a long time when I was in Asia. So when I came back, I said, look, I'm going to buy some nice clothes. I'm going to change my life, nice car. But, I tried it for like a month when I got a job, dressed properly. But then coronavirus came. I went back home. I says, who cares? I love the life of camping, So I've been traveling a lot since I came back home, really a lot. But I always go camping. So even here now in Portugal, I just camp all the time. I see as much as possible. I hike as much as possible.
Do you take food with you, or do you
most times I take food with me, and then also I have tastes like chocolate, like these shakes, right?
Okay.
So I just take that.
Yes, yeah, protein.
Also I have some noodles.
Yes.
They're very cheap noodles, so I just have a water heater and just heat them up, and that's my dinner.
Okay.
So I don't go to every single restaurant, a snack bar.
No.
At the
I
most.
hope not. Otherwise, you'd disappoint me.
Yeah, I don't. The reason, again, for me, it's more important to travel as possible.
Yes.
To see as much as possible than actually.
And keep it as cheap as possible.
And keep it as cheap as possible. One moment I spend in the restaurant is one less moment I could be hiking somewhere, seeing something. I came back full of energy, understand?
Yes, it's recharging the batteries.
During the week, you damage the brain. During the weekend, you damage the body.
Yeah, that's right. Does music play a part in your traveling? Do you associate music and traveling?
Not really, to be honest, not really. I used to listen to a lot of music before I went to Asia, and then all of those years, I didn't watch almost no movies, no music. Exactly. So now when I work, I listen to music when I'm working, but most times when I'm traveling now and doing all of these things, music doesn't really matter, you know. There's a few now, some soft songs that I never listened before. I never like much soft songs,
yes,
right?
Yes, yeah. Ballads,
but yeah, there's a couple of songs now. They are more about. It's kind of funny. They talk a lot about how I miss someone, but for me, it's not someone I miss. It's always the green, you know. I'm missing the vegetation, the trees,
right.
the flowers, you know, the hike. That's what I miss.
Have you ever done the Camino de Santiago?
Always small sections.
Okay,
but
that's not bad. But I'll tell you, the funny thing I find is that people, because they do it for the first time, and for me it was the first time, but they fall in love with it because it's pretty easy, and it's the hardest thing they've ever done. Like for us, it would be nothing. It's nothing really. I mean, I did 1,000 kilometers, and at the end, there's some parts were tough, but you know, I had a broken leg.
Right.
You know, and I still didn't have a spiritual awakening. And I hitchhiked Australia, and most of that I walked with my backpack of 30 kilos. So yeah, it's out there. It's just that people are scared to do things that aren't on the map or aren't pushed.
Yeah, and they don't want to go uncharted. I have one thing I noticed, for example, now on the recent years when I was in Asia, which is totally different from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, most of the people I've met were adventurers. But I think in recent years, it's been more mainstream. So a lot of people are not in adventure. They're more like in a unique experience. But the experience they are unique is not unique at all. So they are usually scams, you know. So there's a lot of people say, look, you're not going to ride the elephant. You're going to wash the elephant because it's a unique experience. But when I got there, it's not a unique experience at all, because everyone now is looking for a unique experience. But there is a unique experience. Just don't buy it.
Yes, don't buy into the crap.
You know, just go yourself, you know, middle of nowhere to a place that no one will say, this is a beautiful place. There's no elephants there. There is no beautiful spot. You just go there.
Yes.
And then you're just going to enjoy it.
Okay, how much planning do you do? Because I don't really plan, and then every day's an adventure.
Okay, so it was like this. When I was doing the long trip, I call it long trip, because it lasts about 3.5 years, right?
Okay.
Again, the goal was simple. Travel as much as possible, as cheap as possible. So you just live the day, right?
Yes, that's right.
And now I came back home, I'm a different mindset because I only have the weekends. Exactly, I have 48 hours, so I want to see as much as possible. So I do some planning, you know, but it's not a very strict planning. I just say, look, there is more or less these points which are my goal. And then along the trip, I try to more or less do that. It doesn't have very, very specific point that I have to do this. If I don't do this, I'm going to die. No, such thing does not exist. Right?
Well, how do you choose the places you go to?
Well, I spend a lot of time checking out Google Maps, you know. Every night, the last year, that's all I do. I just keep, well, even before that, you know, I have so many pins, for example, for Taiwan, because I've been almost everywhere in Taiwan. And now I put pins everywhere on Google Maps where places I want to go. And when I go there, look, I'm on this point A, what about going to this point B? And I just keep going. And then, you know, I follow a bit the flow, my feelings, but I want to see as much as possible. And if I see something that, look, this is worth stopping here and do a good hike here, then I just do it.
Yes.
Because there is no single point I say this is, unless, of course, a place to sleep, right?
And what sort of equipment have you got? Because you say you use a tent. I use a hammock sometimes.
No, the hammock I never use just because I can't sleep on a hammock.
Oh, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But what sort of tent do you have?
Oh, it's one of those Decathlons, you know, fresh and black. I bought one when I was living in Taiwan. Actually, I bought two. When I went back, I bought my second one. They're pretty good. So when I came back here, and now they have a job, so I can afford that. And also,
how much are they then? Are they expensive?
40 euros, I would guess. But you can buy actually one cheaper for 30 euros or 25.
So that's fairly cheap. That's cheap for a tent.
But I did actually bought the most expensive sleeping bag this time. It was 150 euros.
Whoa.
And before I was like...
Was that an Everest?
It's like a ultralight, but 0 degrees Celsius. Mm. So the problem is this, you know, when I was in India, I had a friend, I was like freezing. It's kind of strange, but Calcutta
No, that's right.
was cold.
That's right. If you get
winter,
India at the wrong time.
Right. So when I went to go, I asked a friend of mine who was coming from Portugal to bought me a sleeping bag. And he has been with me for almost 10 years. And he has been my best friend, you know, my best buddy. It's kind of strange because, you know, people say we don't have attachments, but we have attachments.
We do. Yes.
Not to people, but to small little things, you know, that watch that you carry for all of those years, that pillow that you have, the backpack that you have.
I'm like you, I get attached to stuff. And then if I can't find it, I don't often lose things. Right. But if I can't find it, I get seriously pissed off.
Well, first because we're on a shoestring, so any cent that you're going to spend extra is horrible. But also, people change and everything changes, but those things are with you, you know, that jacket has been with you. And when we're cold, middle of nowhere, there was no one there. It was that jacket that you use as a pillow, for example.
That's right, or keeping you warm.
keeping you warm, right?
Yes.
That was, it was your bed sheet, it was that jacket, right? So I get very strongly attached to things.
What's the one thing that you won't travel without, that you always take with you?
No, there isn't. There isn't, actually. There isn't.
Okay.
There isn't. Again, because for a long time it was my backpack, I would say, right?
What make is your backpack?
It was the biggest one I could buy in Decathlon at the time. I was carrying about 30 kilograms taking my bag.
Yeah, but you're still young. You're still young and strong, listeners. He's young and strong.
Don't fuck up my back. My back is horrible now because of the years I spent traveling.
Yes.
Yeah. And now you can have booking.com and all of those things, but before it wasn't. Before I didn't book anything, so I was carrying 30 kilograms and sometimes 2 hours just knocking doors, saying, look, how much it costs here, how much it costs there, and sometimes after 10 hours, 12, 14 hours on the bus, you still had to look for a place to sleep, and then you just found a place, and next day you had found a cheaper place. It was tough. It was really tough.
Well, and that, again, without mobile phones, without GPS, without all that. I mean, I don't particularly use it too much now.
Right.
But I never book. I never book anywhere. I just roll into town, and if there's somewhere and it's full,
right,
I just think, well, I wasn't meant to stay there.
Right.
So then I just go to the next place. But I'm like you. I've walked around. Georgetown was one of them.
Right.
When I first went to Georgetown, I had something like 29 kilos.
Yeah, that's where we met.
And yeah, I know, but I was walking around there for hours looking for the right hostel that I found was the cheapest one. Somebody said to me, "Go there because it's cheap," and eventually I found it. But I'd walk round and round early in the morning, and I had to ask a road sweeper, an Indian road sweeper, where it was, and he took me there.
Oh, is it?
Oh, a proper chap, yeah, good man. He's possibly still working. he's still working there 10 years later. But yeah. It makes you what you are. It makes you the traveller you are.
Yeah, being tough, it's important, but also the good side is that you become strong in life. You less.
But do you think you're mentally strong?
Yes. The flip side is you don't know how to stop anymore. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, before I left, every trip was like a short trip, right? A month, a week, and all of these things, right? And you have your job back, and you dream one day of quitting your job and travel around the world, but you're not going to do it, right? And then when you do it, the hardest part is not to travel. The hardest part is to stop.
It's to stop.
Because you don't know how to stop anymore. You don't want to stop. And then when you I had to come back, find a proper job. I had a job before, but a proper job here back home. And it's just not easy after 10 years coming back home, you understand? And before I just lived day by day. Now I don't. I live with a single goal, to go back to the nomadic life. That's it. So everything that I do gravitate towards that goal.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't buy anything that's unnecessary. For example, before I could buy like a nice stereo set, like a nice TV. I don't do that anymore. I had to change, for example, recently my washing machine. I didn't bought the best washing machine. I just bought the one,
Yeah.
The only thing I had to bought really good this year was my sleeping bag, because I've been traveling. I want to travel in winter.
This guy's a proper traveller. Anybody that spends a lot of money on a sleeping bag and nothing on a washing machine is brilliant. Yeah.
And I almost freeze to that several times. And this time, I want to have a proper sleeping bag. Okay.
Yeah, because if it's hot, you can just sleep on top of it.
That's true.
And you could whatever. It doesn't make any difference.
It's just great. I really, when I live in Taiwan, I always camp in the wild all the time.
Yes.
And it's sometimes just so incredibly cold. It's just so cold. But the love for the adventure was stronger than the cold, right? Since I came back, before I have a nice, soft bed back home, but I also have a couch.
Yes.
And most of the time, actually, I sleep on the couch inside the sleeping bag.
Yes,
most times, actually, then on my own bed. When I see an apartment, I don't want to see like a nice, comfortable place. I see, look, it has to be good because I want to later on rent it out.
Yes.
When I go traveling again. And then when you travel, you meet all kinds of crazy people and people are outside the society and entrepreneurs.
I think that's how we met.
Yeah, exactly. And I met people, for example, they cycle from France to India. I met here Alan, did 1,000 kilometers on Camino. And these kind of people are completely different. So
different mindset.
Mindset. You can never go back to the same old life. It's like, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
I just want to go, right?
Yeah.
Even if the risks are high, the stakes are very high.
Yeah, the stakes are high, but we just suck them up and go with them. Okay, but if a person came to you and they asked for advice about travelling, because these days travelling is very different from it was when we started, what sort of advice would you give a young person about travelling?
Well, it all depends, again, their own mindset, because a lot of people think travelling is cool. most people these days will travel because it's just so mainstream. You travel, for a couple of drinks, for a different experience, for a nice beach. But if they really become hardcore travelers, only very few people can actually endure that.
Yes,
it's tough. It's very rewarding. It's incredibly rewarding, but it's not for everyone. You have to have the spirit of sacrifice, of constrain yourself. Every day you know that you have to live on a very, very tight budget. And there is huge risks that you never know if you're going to break a leg or you have some extra expense. You don't know how you're going to cover that expense.
Yes.
And then you have to put yourself in very awkward situations that you rely on other people because you're on an incredibly low budget. So I only advise to do that if you really have the right mindset. But besides that, I would give for the average person is this: the world is not as dangerous as you think.
No, that's true. That is so true. People build up anxiety over the silliest little things.
Right, exactly.
And a lot of people I've met just want everything to be perfect. The weather's got to be right, or...
Well, because again, they're traveling for the destination itself, because they are buying a destination.
Okay, how do you think the coronavirus has affected traveling?
Well, to be honest, unlike most people think, first, it completely hammered traveling for the time being. But after coronavirus, after finding the vaccine, first years might be a bit tough, but after that, I think it's going to come back to the normal as just before. Let's just see, for example, what happened in TP Islands. And when there was the tsunami, right?
Yes.
So when it was the tsunami, like TP Islands was completely destroyed, completely. Even Phuket, right?
Yeah, Phuket.
By the time I went back, it was just already full of life. So like Portugal, for example, when I came back last year, was just lively, like tourism everywhere. And now it's just been completely destroyed, hammered. I'm pretty much sure when the coronavirus is over, it might take a couple of months, maybe a year, let's say. But after that, I think everything will be back to normal.
Alex, thank you very, very much for the interview.
Good to see you again.
And we'll try and keep in touch now.
Right.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Well, that's all for this week, folks. And please remember, the same road can be travelled 1,000 different ways. So get out there and make it your own. Until next week.